What if? You woke up tomorrow and you felt different. What if? You began to question what others haven't noticed. What if? I began to have experiences I could not explain at a very young age. Our worldview is filled with intrigue, wonder, adventure, and of course, mysteries. However, there are some situations that we cannot fully explain, and it's time we open up this dialogue and talk about our experiences. I am your host, Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz. Welcome to Haunted Mysteries. Welcome to Haunted Mysteries Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz. This show will air every other week on the Get Haunted Podcast Network. So sit back and relax, and if you miss it, go to the Get Haunted Podcast Network Facebook page or to my YouTube channel under Haunted Mysteries Podcast. Spend an hour every other week with us, delving into what most of us are chasing after, answers to unexplained happenings. This show brings you a bit of chatter, topics, theories, guest interviews, and more. May you be a believer in cryptids, apparitions, UFOs, consciousness abilities, or anything else. Know that there is another person out there who has experienced something similar or a bit stranger. It's not always in our imagination. This episode is pre-recorded. Good evening, everyone, and thanks again for joining me for yet another episode of Haunted Mysteries Podcast. My name is Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz. I am the host and the producer of this show. Today, we have a very interesting guest with us. Jen Sankey is in the house, and I have had her on other shows of mine in the past, and I thought, it was time to come back and see what she's been up to and what she's doing, and it's quite a lot. Jen would refer to herself as a gray witch, which is quite interesting in and of itself. And not only that, she is also a psychic medium, Reiki master, tarot reader, you name it, I think she does it. But before we get into that interview, why don't we learn just a little bit more about my special guest today, Jen Sankey. Our guest this evening is Jen Sankey. Jen is an author, deck creator, tarot reader, professional witch, paranormal experiencer, and speaker. She blends tarot, lunar magic, and spiritual guidance together to create transformative tools. Her works include the award-winning Stardust Wanderer Tarot, Enchanted Forest Felines Tarot, Manifesting with the Moon, A Lunar Guide to Magic, and Goblin Whispers Tarot. Jen shares her knowledge through workshops, events, and online platforms, inspiring others to embrace their intuition and magical potential. From a very young age, Jen was having also paranormal experiences. This is when she learned she was clairaudient, telepathic, and of course, honed into her gifts of being able to assist and explain to others what their experiences were. One of her most interesting gifts is the ability to understand animals. Yes, you heard me. The ability to read and understand what your pet is thinking. But before we delve right into that, why don't you just sit back, grab yourself a stuffed animal, and enjoy the show. Please welcome tonight, Jen Sankey. Well, welcome back, Jen. So glad to see you again.
It is awesome to see you too. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, most people don't realize, but I had Jen on another show of mine quite a while ago, and I thought, you know what, let's see what she's up to. So we've got her back, and you've got her for today, and you're going to enjoy this one. So sit back and enjoy. Here we go. So Jen, one of the things that we're going to do what is called get acquainted here for just a moment, and we're going to start out with, I'm going to have people tell you just a little bit about yourself, and then we'll evolve this into how this all unfolded and evolved along the way.
Okay. My name is Jen Sankey, obviously. And I am a practicing witch, author, tarot reader, energy healer. I actually just blanket it usually with professional witch because most of us have so many modalities. It would take the whole hour to name them all off. So just do things, witchy things. And I do a lot of teaching and a lot of speaking as well. And I have been practicing since I was 12 years old. And that's when I learned tarot, or was attempting to learn tarot anyway. And then it just kind of all evolved from there. I live in upstate New York. I live in Massachusetts and in Florida. I'm kind of all over the place. I have 4 boys. Well, I should say guys because they're not boys anymore, but I have 4 guys. They're a little older, but yeah. And I just actually got a brand new kitty named Maisie Moon. And
that's cute. Jen, you look a day over 25 to me. I don't even know how you managed
it.
Oh my goodness.
All of it. Thank you.
It must be her night cream, everybody. We might have to reach out.
Glamour magic, friends. Glamour
I was going to say, and did you say you're a witch, by the way? What kind of witch?
I am. So I would consider myself eclectic. I kind of pull from a lot of different dimensions. I also kind of do mediumship and those sort of things, which I don't like to call myself a psychic, just because I feel like it's so Hollywood now, but things happen. I talk to things that aren't here, and that's kind of, I did that as a child, and that was kind of the beginning of, once I figured out not everyone can see what I see is kind of when I was like, oh, okay, something's a little different here. So I do practice. I do a lot with the moon, gods and goddesses, nature, the fae, all of that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Are you able to tell us? I just recently interviewed, let's see, there was a white witch I interviewed. There was a green witch that I interviewed. Okay. Are you either of those? Are you a different kind of witch? And how do you differentiate between those types of witches?
It's the color itself is a great indication. So you have a green witch. That's somebody who does a lot of plant magic. So green, like a green thumb. A white witch would be somebody who focuses on very light magic. And not weight light, but more light, heavenly, more angel, maybe they might be focused on that sort of thing. And, for me, I guess, I don't know. I'd like to see them probably, if I had to, I don't love labels, but if I had to label myself, I'd probably say gray. I'd be more like a gray witch. I'm kind of in between all of it. I'm in that limited space. I do a little of this, I do a little of that. I really trust my intuitions, my instincts. I listen to the higher up. I listen to the lower. I kind of just really go right in between. So I guess that's, if I had to label myself, I'd say I'm more of a gray witch.
That's interesting. I didn't until I started doing this interview stuff with people. I really, the whole idea of the witches, just started to kind of surface up more and more, and it's very intriguing. So a lot of times people think of witches as bad, and I haven't talked to any witch per se that has been bad. They don't necessarily cast negative spell. Some probably do, but I mean, cast negative spells on people or anything like that. They're actually some of them that I've met are actually quite nice and helpful and insightful and very loving, so that's the one thing that I think people misunderstand regarding what a witch could possibly be. Oh, they're also going, of course, by the witch on the Wizard of Oz, right? You got
yes. Well, that's it. You got the movie witches and you got real witches.
Yep. That's very interesting, though. Let's go back now to when you started to realize or come into your awakening, or you probably were already in your awakening, you just didn't realize it. And tell us what happened back then where it's like, kind of a moment, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I guess the earliest, we'll start back to little Jen. I was probably 4, 5, 6 years old, and I always talked to all sorts of things I didn't know that other people couldn't see, now in hindsight, but they were just always there. And my parents were they were just off doing their thing. I was alone a lot as a child, and I do have a couple younger siblings, so I kind of had to watch them too, but for the most part, I was always outside. I was always in the woods. I was always just talking to the trees, talking to the plants, talking to all of these things. And I would say to adults like, oh, this tree is telling me this. And they'd be like, oh, trees can't talk, and, adults are always there to, ruin the magic of things. And I think, once I started realizing and kind of getting feedback from other people, I was like, oh, okay. And then I would start kind of testing it out. I'd be like, I would ask the spirits that were around, are you real? And of course they think they're real. So, okay, they're real. And I'd say something to the babysitter. Oh, do you see Gladys over there? And they'd be like, what are you talking about? So I probably freaked out a few, babysitters. I'm pretty sure. So the one though, that was always there, that, what her name, I always called her the White Lady. But because she was that dusky white kind of, but she was in Victorian, very plain though. And she was always there around at night. And I feel like now in hindsight, I know she kind of protected me because there was a lot of the house that we had lived in, which that house actually mysteriously burned down a couple of years later, which was very weird. But there was a lot of kind of shadow people in that house, very unsettled entities happening there. And she was always at my bed at night, and she would jostle me awake, and I would go and hide in my closet, or I would hide under my bed, because also my dad was a drinker, and so he would start getting unruly too. And then she always kind of protected me, and she was always there. And I would start, after a while, I kind of depended on that and waited for that to happen. But as I got older and started talking about it, but he's like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? What's shadow? And it's like, oh, okay. At that point, you just get conditioned to start just keeping it to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course I watched all the movies, any movie that came out that was any sort of paranormal, scary, any witchy, at that point, because I felt like I could relate to it in a weird way. Because sometimes in those movies you did. And of course, it's all skewed, like we were talking about, like the witches in movies and the witches in real life. It wasn't what it was, but that's all I had at that point. We didn't have the internet at that point, so it was whatever was on TV. And so, that is kind of, I leaned into watching that because I felt like it was just almost comforting in a way. Like the scary movies were comforting. Like, okay, you're
Well,
but I think, that relatability is what it was.
yeah, and I mean, I can relate to you a little bit on that. Although the Twilight Zone and Horror Incorporated and something else we had back in my day was kind of the equivalent of mysterious and interesting and quirky and whatever. And but you know what? A lot of times people don't realize that they may have abilities or gifts, and then at the point that you're going, oh, I think I'm a little bit different than other people around here. Yeah, I didn't, it's not like I like it, but I understand the conditioning of being able to, many people that I've interviewed, including myself, we just, after a while, just shut up and didn't say anything at all because people would start labeling you as, back in my day, it was all about medication. Okay. So, oh, they sound a little bit off here. Let's go get them medicated or they're having they didn't know back in my day. I think even when you're talking schizophrenia or you're talking things like that or bipolar, back in those days it could actually be legitimate, but it also people would label that because they didn't have any other way to know how to label what they were experiencing with you. So yeah, they'd stay away from them. They're a little bit on the schizo.
They're having episodes,
Yeah.
meanwhile we just, I know. Thankfully, we're slowly getting a hold on all of that. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a lot of times too. There are people that just have intense abilities and they don't know how to harness them, use them, and they're just that wide open. Their energy's wide open. Who isn't going to lose it after a while? After you're just like a little vacuum sucking in all the energy around you at all times, having to try to process that, then having your energy on top of it. I mean, that's chaotic. That is chaotic. And if they don't know how to like tamper that down and close things off, I mean, yeah, you're going to be having an episode.
Yeah. And understanding it, and then it's draining too. Like I didn't know that it was I didn't even know what an empath was until someone said to me, "Are you an empath?" And it's like, what's an empath? What's a star? I didn't ask, what am I? And I've been asking that question for a long time. It's just so strange because, because it's not common language that is still, I don't think, still tossed around. I just had my nephew, I saw him over the weekend, and he's like 10th grade, okay? And he's just now coming in to understand, not really, but to learn more about what I do for my career right now, which, believe me, I fell into this, people. I have no idea who guided me here, but now I'm here, right? And he was like saying, yeah, we're going on I don't know, someone in his school or something is bringing him to like what is basically a haunted location, okay? But they don't really know at that age what a haunting really is. It's like something you would probably watch on a cartoon or on TV when they play pretend or whatever, kind of thing. And it's like, I don't know, he's not at that age yet. I mean, he's getting there to fully understand the depth of what we go through. And so my abilities are probably half of your abilities because I can't seem to get them there. But once in a while, I'm there. I go in and out. Let's talk a little bit about your abilities because, I can name off all my Claires and tell everybody, I have a million things going on. What ability do you think is your strongest? Give us some things that you can do.
It's so funny because I love this question too because it's a question you don't get asked very often. I really have to think about it because usually, like I said, it's like one of those things like you just don't even talk about. So, I would have to say, for me, is just really just the hearing of spirits. I kind of like at this point kind of tuned everything. I feel like everything's kind of, they fluctuate depending on my energy, the day, whatever's going on astrologically, because that always plays a part for me. I'm very sensitive to that. Probably I would say my least right now is smell, but I do get that. That one pops up every once in a while. Usually the hearing, the touch, I'd say is in kind of medium. Really it's just the feeling, just overall feeling, and just picking up things from people. I can do, sleep. In my sleep, I can get a lot of messages in my sleep. So honestly, it's like when I go to bed at night, like I put in the laundry list of things I need to know.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of dream work. That is a really big thing. And I do like using a candle magic. I read the candle wax. So, which is something not a lot of people do. So that's like, and then even tea leaf reading, the tarot, I like to use the other implements just to kind of deepen the reading and having that visual for other people. Because that seems to really work well too. So I think I answered your question.
Yeah.
I kind of was touching on it.
No,
I think so.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's perfect. Because from that, I'm going to break it down a little bit. Okay. So the first thing that I heard you say was like you do really well for hearing. That's called clairaudient, by the way.
Yeah.
Those of you learning this for the first time, when you're hearing things. Now, a lot of people in the past would say, oh, you're hearing things in your head. Oh, you must be schizophrenic. That doesn't necessarily mean you're schizophrenic or bipolar. Okay. It just means that somehow you might be channeling some a source, or like I do channel. It's not male, it's not female. It's kind of like in between, and it directs me in things that it wants me to do. Example, writing a book, going to a winning slot machine, picking numbers, seeing colors. So let's talk about you. So clairaudient, the ability to hear spirit or something. How often do they come to you periodically? Are they around you all the time? How do they get drawn to you? What kinds of things can you say about that?
I think I always have a couple hanging around me. For sure. When I'm at the tavern, I have a 1715 tavern. It wasn't a fully functioning working tavern. Now it's just our home. So when I'm there, obviously I know it's going to be busy because, and usually it is pretty busy there. So there I have everyone's hanging around me. They just like to follow me around. When I'm doing readings, a lot of times people, loved ones might pop in. Or even sometimes it's their higher self will send me messages, like things like they've been trying to get through to them and it hasn't. So they need, and sometimes we do need that other perspective. And that's where, when you go to somebody for a reading, that's where that comes really in handy, because yourself is trying to tell you something and you're not listening. So at least then I could pick up on that and bring it out for you, and pets I get a lot of as well. They're one of my favorite because they're very blunt, and they're not like worried about any. They're just like, they're like straight shooters. They tell you what it is, and this is what I want. This is what I don't want. So that's always interesting and fun. And I will pick up, on people, like if I'm in the store. And this actually I do Reiki as well. I am a Reiki master. And a crystal healer. But when I'm in the store, sometimes I'll be standing in back of somebody in line and my hands tingle. That's how and I'm like, oh, this person needs something, but you can't just go up to people and like, so it's really that discernment too. That is such a teaching tool, because when, you might come up near someone too, and you might get a message, or you might feel their sadness, or you might feel, you know what I mean? And you can't just go up to them and like, hey, I feel like you're sad. Are you okay? So it's again, just trying to hone that and, use it in a way that is helpful, because we all, usually people that are in this type of work are here to help. Like we are here as servants to help you and have you be the best version of yourself.
Yeah, I think
go ahead.
You mentioned something really key here. So people might be aware of this show or this, there's a show on for a while, which one I'm talking about. Most people might, where when this psychic would get some messages from somebody, and she would be going everywhere to tap people on the shoulder and go, I just got a message for you and I need to tell you about this message. Now, keep in mind that not everybody wants to, what's the word? Just not disclose, but want to be part of that conversation. They might freak out, or they might get really depressed because of it, or you might put them in a worse mood that they've been in, or they might be happy about it. I mean, it's not, if I had people come up to me in a grocery store as an example and say, you know what, I have a message for you, I think from my end of it, just because I know who I am and you know, I need my space kind of thing, I would probably end up saying to them, thank you very much, but I've got people I go to that will give me those answers when I'm ready.
No, I agree.
Them.
I would never do that. And that's just me again. That's just my thing. Some people feel like that's what they need to do, but I have seen actually, like, in real time, people doing that sort of thing and it not working out. Yeah. Some people are so closed off and they do that, and you know, they do that as a protective measure for themselves. Mm-hmm. And if you disrupt that, you can throw them into such a tailspin that can end in a very tragic way. Mm-hmm. So, you know, and to me, that's more of the reader's ego. Mm-hmm. And if you lead by ego, obviously it's never a good idea, right? Mm-hmm. You know, in some instances, like if you're doing stuff for yourself, obviously, but to jostle somebody's energy, just to do that, just to kind of get that little, you know, I mean, to me, it's yucky and I don't like it. And I don't feel that it's helpful. If I'm near somebody and I feel like maybe like their energy just feels awful, you know, just like throw them a compliment or say something pleasant, and, or just even just say hi to them. And that's enough. You know what I mean? Because I feel like too, that if they accept that too, and they accept that warm energy, that whatever that message is will find its way through when the time is right for them. Mm-hmm. Not when it's right for me. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so important.
Yeah, you're probably one of the first people that finally hit it on the nose. Yes, that's exactly right. Yes, you have. Thank you for that, because I need people to really listen to the last 5 minutes here of what we've been talking about regarding that. It is not that they don't want to help you. It is not that they don't want to give you a message that someone is trying to get through, to give them a message. It's how they proceed with that message that can make or break that moment. And, you know, there's a lot of people that cannot handle the moment, grief, loss, tragedy, the whole thing, and to stir it up and say, your kid's perfectly happy on the other side, they just don't want you to be so sad anymore. Then you get into the believability part of this whole thing. Who are you? Have you been spying on me? Why are you saying this to me? What? Go away. Or you have the, oh my God. And then you have the obsession part. Oh my God, she talked to my son. Now I got to talk to her every other day because I miss my son so much. There is so much that goes on when you are meeting someone such as Jen, that has abilities, and she's learning to calm it down or block some of this stuff so it doesn't affect her life to a large degree, but use it in a way that helps people along the way. So glad you brought that up. Thank you so very much. Let's talk a little bit. There's some more clairs here, because I know that I've got clairaudient periodically. You know, I do get that and I understand it, and I don't think I'm schizophrenic. I feel like I'm pretty level-headed most days. Depends on the day and if I'm on the road, you know. Yeah, road rage.
Definitely depends on the day. Let's not commit to being totally okay, because that's never, for me, that's never a thing. There's always a little bit of something happening here.
Exactly. And when you see me on the road and you see my hands waving in the air at somebody, please forgive me, you know, because it's just like no one knows how to drive anymore. You know, it's just like they go through stop signs and stoplights and this and that. You gotta, my God, they don't even teach you this in defensive driving. It's just like, I think the whole course on that alone. Let's talk about, let's see here. I think visual is interesting. So I have heard reports, and from a number of people that I've talked with who have actually visually and talked with apparitions or ghosts or whatever you want to refer to them as being, even otherworldly, and they don't realize that until they start to rethink what these people kind of look like. Do you visually? Can you visually see apparitions? Did you see them when you were younger? Did you say like
I did. Yes, I did. I do feel, I think when I was younger, it was definitely probably like my top Claire.
Yeah.
At that point, I think because that was probably what was needed at the time. And I feel like that our Claires pronounce themselves more when you need them. And, and of course, you probably don't even realize it. But that's, like I was able to visually see them because I needed that. I needed that like adult reassurance that everything was going to be okay. So I do see sometimes, and there's times too that I choose not to see them. And I say, just speak with me. I do not need to see your appearance. I do not, because, and for me, that's more of like, and not that anybody's grotesque looking. Everybody's going to look how they're, they usually look fine. But again, it's just when you can pull from each of these Claires and like stack them all together. It's a lot, so I pick and choose what can I use, which one will help me get to where I need to go or what answer I need to get to. Do I need to see the person to get this answer that I'm, speaking to them with? Not really. So why do I need to expend that energy? And it really comes down to that give and take of energy and of course you can do that, but then you're tapping into ego again. Oh, well, I can see and hear and feel and touch everything. So I'm going to do that with everyone I speak to. You're going to be exhausted like all the time. So and so for me, I really just, I just really pick and choose what I am doing. But sometimes I do want to see a visual. If I'm doing a reading for somebody, even just a tarot reading, and I do know a loved one's coming through, that's helpful. Mm-hmm. This is what they're looking like. This is what they're wearing. Aunt Margie has a lot of, purple flowers on her dress, and that person, yeah, that's right. She always had, this was her favorite dress. That's helpful. If I'm getting a visual, if I'm talking to Uncle Frank, but he just has a message and sometimes they don't even want to show themselves. They're like, no, I gotta just tell you something and I'm out of here. Because sometimes for spirits, entities, it's uncomfortable to be in this realm for them. So they just pop in and out and say without saying they're out of here because it's just not comfortable. And I think that must be like an energy, I wonder if it feels weird to them. So I definitely do pick and choose. So we'll say that's a sometimes one.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I've talked to a few psychic mediums, et cetera, and I ask the question all the time, are you pulling it from the Akashic records? How do you, people always want to know, how do they know so much? And then it depends on how it's the message or whatever is delivered. And someone will say, no, they can't always come on command, that kind of thing either. And then you have those that say, the minute they die, they're transforming, or they might hang around for a little bit, but then they start the transformation process in them, and then they ultimately might visit once in a while or whatever, but they're transforming to, I don't know, another level, another being, another whatever. What are your thoughts on that? Because people are so confused about their loved ones once they pass, and I can validate and verify that up to 3 months, usually for me, especially with my father, and from what I've heard of other people's situations, usually up to 3 months, I am receiving signs, I am receiving information in some way and all that, and then all of a sudden it just kind of slowly dissolves and goes away. What are your thoughts on the afterlife process here?
I do believe that it is different for every person. When they pass over, I do think some people are done with this realm and they're like, all right, bye. They may hang around a little bit just to give those reassuring signs because they know that their loved ones need that. Mm-hmm. So they will show up. There's been schools of thought that, don't start working with somebody in the afterlife until after about a year. so that they have acclimated and decided how much they want to come in and out and all of that. That's, I can see that. I can kind of see that, but that's also, I feel like, that person's opinion on getting comfortable. And some people, it's a very personal thing. I think some people pass over and they're ready to go. They're all right. Yep. We're going to be doing messages. We're doing all these things and they want to be active. But there are those people that they just, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to stick around, make you feel better, send you some birds. But you know what? After that, I'm on my way. I think I'm done here and I want to go. But they also may hang around really like kind of far up, I feel like, too. Just keep an eye out, but they know that those constant reminders to those people that they love, again, like talking about like the person in the store. If they keep, then it's that obsession, and then those are the people that are going to mediums every single, week. And, there's been times I've had to actually fire clients because of that sort of thing, because I'm like, no, this is not healthy. And I'm honestly, maybe the first time or two I did have someone come through, but then after that they stopped coming through because they're like, I see what's happening. And they realize it too. So I do feel like it's such an individualized thing. And I think it's based on a person's beliefs. I think it's also based on perhaps the clairs that they may have had. I do believe that. I do think that it's afterwards giving it a little bit of time for you and them. Not in the year thing. You don't have to, I feel like that's a little bit long, but I just read that though. But I do think just giving it a little time and just letting things happen naturally and not forcing it is really important, because I've had people just doing readings on them and, a grandmother showed up that they didn't even know. And a lot of times you do get those family members you don't know. And it's like, why are they coming to me now? Why? My mom went to a medium and it's her mom. They didn't even go to her. And it's like, well, yeah, but they have these messages for certain people. And they also know who can handle this information and who can't, because I do feel that's kind of a spirit clair given to them after the fact to kind of have, again, that discernment to be like, all right, if I'm going to go talk to my niece, I know that she's going to be receptive to it and not, idolize me and get crazy about it. But if I go and talk to my sister, she's just going to go down that hole again. So again, it's almost that grocery store situation, and I do feel that spirits kind of have that same thing. And, sometimes they do just want to go where they're going to go and see what's out there and enjoy that. And 10 years later, all of a sudden, you got Grandpa Joe coming at you and you're like, where is it? But he wasn't ready to yet, he wasn't, and he wasn't ready to see what was going on. So I think it's very personal, and I don't think one size fits all at all, like not even a little bit. And I think, for the sake of, society, we always are trying to put everything in these little boxes. And this is, so you pass over, this is what happens right in here. That's it. And I think it's so much more than that. And I think it's such a more like involved, but also a very beautiful process that happens. And I think just letting it happen, letting it flow and happen the way it's supposed to instead of forcing it is so important.
Yeah, I think you hit the word here, forcing it. Some people want to know, like, I've talked with several people, sometimes even myself. I've used psychic mediums for 40 years now. So I'm very used to dealing with some that pick up on things very well and some that don't pick up on things very well, or maybe they have the elements right but the story's wrong, and that's always frustrating, because if you hear one thing and then it doesn't happen and you get all frustrated and all this stuff and whatever. So you got to be careful about that. The other thing that people sometimes want to know is like, and it was a point that somebody brought up on a guest on one of the shows I was interviewing with, is like, someone will say, well, people ask me all the time. They say, can you ask like Aunt Martha or whatever, where the recipe book is or something like that, because it's gone missing. Someone has it. Someone's not upping it. Someone's not, being honest here. Can you just tell us where the heck this recipe book is? And so I get different different ideas from different people who have certain gifts to be able to do. Some people just do better at certain things. Some are relationships. Some people do better with career paths. Some people do better with this. Some people can do it all. But what are your thoughts to people when they want to get really direct and go, can you ask Aunt Martha who has that recipe book? Because I really, you know what I mean? What do you do in a case like that?
I have had situations like that. I think it was a piece of jewelry. It was like a charm bracelet, something of that. It doesn't hurt to ask. If they're, for me, if you have a picture of it, that's a little bit better for me too. But I do feel that it's a lot of re-roll. It's one of those things, like sometimes you might get an answer of a location, or they may know, like I know I've seen, like, oh, it's like in this cupboard in the back, there's a white box, it's in there, because that's the last place that they saw it. Mm-hmm. But they don't know, they're not keeping track of all the little bibs and bobs of everybody, so sometimes they don't remember. They know the last place that they had it, but they don't know what happened to it after that, because maybe they haven't even been back to that location because there was no reason for them to be.
No,
so people need to realize that they're not like this all-seeing, like, and it's like, it never hurts to ask ever, but just know that you're most likely not going to get the answer. I mean, sometimes you do. Sometimes you do. She pops in and is like, hey, it's over here, Linda has it, and she's been keeping it in her shoe in her closet for 30 years. Go get that thing, Those are fun. That's fun when that happens. But
yeah. What's even better is you just mentioned my sister's name, and she's the one who listens to this show. So, no, this is no reference to you. By the way, we're not accusing you of having the recipe book.
No. I mean, clear of all the things, Linda. All the things, totally clear.
But be very, very. I know I'm going to hear about this when she listens to this show. It's just like, I did not mention your name. This is how good Jen is.
I take all blame, Linda. I just want to say hello to you, and I hope you're having a fantastic day.
In the meantime, I'm getting 29 spanks on my end. It's kind of interesting because but that brings us to the next one. This is good, Jen. Picking up names. That's a good one because, there are people that sometimes can, and sometimes, you got to be careful. Some people can't. So how do you do with picking up random names like that? Because that's very interesting, because, by the way, Joe is the name of my grandfather. Okay. And so, yeah. Okay. I know. I'm like, okay, that's 2 for 2 here. And I'm like, she's sitting here giving me a reading, and I haven't paid her yet. So, I will be collecting from all of you. Well, my grandfather, yes, he's deceased, and he's been gone for quite a while. But you know what? That does bring up another point, and then I'll get to the name thing in a second.
Yeah.
They're diehard Catholics when they passed away. And I had asked, my husband is a diehard Catholic, and his parents were a diehard Catholic too. Yeah. I've asked him periodically, do you think you've ever received any kind of a message from your parents? Now, I can tell you, and I can verify it, and I've written about it in my books, both of them. His parents came to me, and to us at one point, but his mother specifically came to me at the point of her passing, which was literally within an hour or so afterwards, and practically blew out my eardrums with a song that was not being played outdoors, by the way. And this is where I was going to our car in another state because we had something going on there, and this Christmas song, which was not even close to Christmas Christmas, was just like blowing out my ears. And then I went inside and I said I was delirious and, dizzy and all that, and everything looked weird. And I said to him, does the song Silent Night mean anything to you? And then he just stops in his tracks, and he's very upset because his mother just died. And he goes, yeah, it was my mom's favorite song. Go outside right now. It's playing outside. So he goes outside and he couldn't hear a thing. Well, that's because there wasn't anything playing outside. They weren't rehearsing for anything. It was literally blowing out my ears to the point where I couldn't stand it anymore. And that was her message to me that she was okay. But, let's talk a little bit about that. And they do come. They did come, but some of them won't come. And we did talk about that. But names. Do names come to you when they're introducing, or like they're coming in and saying, I'm Gloria, or whatever the case may be? Is that how these names come to you? You just, all of a sudden, it just kind of pops out. What happens with names with you?
Yes, you got like a little prime example of it. They just happen. It just comes out, they just pop up. Or like sometimes I will, if I'm doing a reading, it really depends on where I am. If I'm doing a reading, the name will kind of just pop up like in my head, like in my mind's eye, like I'll just see the name like written. Yep. And a lot of times it's probably written in their handwriting. So I think sometimes, I'll get that. Or like that, like I'm just having a conversation and I'm popping out names because names are popping up. And there's, again, I've been around people and a name pops up in my head, and, and sometimes, if I know them, if I'm close with them, but there's even been family members that I know things have come up and like names and stuff, and I haven't said anything. So I feel like it would upset them. And I would, a lot of times what I say, I'll say it, quietly in my head is just, if you need to send them a message, then you need to give it to them directly. They're not going to receive it from me well. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I have to redirect them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, names do pop up in my head a lot, which I guess I never really even thought about it, but I guess they do.
Mm-hmm. Well, and colors and sometimes numbers pop into my flashes. I get flashes.
Yeah.
I have to be very tired, though. I have to be dead tired. I have to be almost depressed tired. I have to be zombie tired to activate.
Everything, all those defenses are down. That's why. And that's when you're your most open. And that's why a lot of people, right before they go to bed, like right as they're falling asleep, that's like the best time to receive messages or put out questions, because it's that when all your defenses are down for the day.
Yeah, and you had mentioned that, so you're kind of like asking questions and all of this comes to you and stuff. Are you asking on behalf of clients or yourself, or are you trying to see what your next month looks like? What kinds of things come to you?
It depends, really on the night. Sometimes I'll just ask things about myself for myself. If I do have a client, and that I talk to, and, maybe like a question wasn't we weren't able to answer it really clearly, because I just felt like I needed more context or that sort of thing. And I'll be like, you know what, I'm going to sleep on it, and I'll get back to you. I'll send you a little message if I do get something. And most times I do. For example, actually last night I was thinking about before bed, I told you I'd gotten a kitten, and I was thinking about, next year I have a couple of trips that I have to go on. So I'm like, I got to start getting a babysitter, or like, a sitter for the cat rather. Mm-hmm. And so I had a dream last night about that and what the person looked like. So I was like, oh, okay. So now I have an idea of what this person looks like. So when I'm interviewing or looking for that, if that pops in my head, oh yeah, that's the person, then that's probably, I will definitely interview them and see, and then that sort of thing. So that's kind of how I use it. And a lot of times there's, even if maybe I'm really anxious that day for some reason, or I just had a crap day, and I'm just like, what can I do to feel better? Can someone send me some healing energy or that sort of thing? And then, most times I mean, a good night's sleep always helps, if you are blessed with a good night's sleep, regardless, it's, okay, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit more clear in the morning. And it's a little bit different as just getting a good night's sleep. It's just more like a mentally clear, like, because, sometimes when you go to bed, it's like, right as you're falling asleep too. It's like everything, every little thing of the day, every little thing you have to get done. And it's one of those things, like, I'm just like, okay, can you help me quiet my mind? Can you help me? And you know what? Even if you don't work with anybody, gods or goddesses or anything, just try it. It's helpful because it's just being mindful of what's going on in your head right now and just trying to quiet that and teaching. It's almost like teaching yourself to help quiet your mind. And that's like a mindset thing.
So where do you think I'm going to give you an example in a second here. So where do you think this information is coming from? I'll give you an example first so you kind of get the context. So I sat in a restaurant for, oh my God, 3-4 hours. I could sit in a restaurant for days. It's my place of peace. It's my place of just calming down and doing what I'm doing. And I struggled with trying to figure out, believe it or not, the name of the show that you're on, but not just this show, but other shows that I also have on. This one, namely Paranormal Latte. I also have to mention Haunted Mysteries, Phantasm, all these shows that I have. And I just struggled. And guess what? So I went to bed that one night. I said, I just don't know. I said, I have no clue what names I should be looking for these new podcasts that I'm doing. And in the morning, guess what? The very first thing that popped into my head as I woke up was, well, for this show and the other shows, Paranormal Latte, Haunted Mysteries, all of that downloaded and just came right into my head. And I said, good one. I said, thank you. I've been struggling with that. But where do you think that's coming from? Because you know what? I never thought about that. Those names. They were, what do you think?
I think there's a lot floating around, like up in our higher self, and we aren't giving that the time or the space to actually download what's already there, because there's so much already within us. And, we are conditioned to not trust ourselves, especially as a woman. You are conditioned not to trust anything that your brain thinks. That's just how, and it's awful, and it's slowly getting changed. But I think that's one of those things, is just learning to trust yourself. And then you're going to be amazed at how much downloads you get just from yourself. I do think that if there are, those ancestors, those family spirits are all around, that's an easy way for them to help give you answers. I don't think it's any one thing. I think, again, it all depends on the situation, what's going on. If you do actively work with gods and goddesses or source or spirit or whatever you want to call it, that can be the source of it. I do feel like those everyday questions, though, it comes more from our higher self.
Interesting. Well, and a lot of people, like you say, don't give enough credit for that, because we have learned to doubt ourselves for the longest time, and then we double guess in that. But that brings me to an interesting question, because so some people will say, oh, this is coming from your ancestors. I'm thinking of one particular person, by the way, who I think knows you and really likes you. Okay. And if you're listening to this program right now, this is nothing, this isn't an attack or anything. This is just a perspective that just popped into my head that I'm going to ask about. So, I am very much into my genealogy. And I am very much into trying to understand my relatives of the past. And my relatives of the past, like all of ours, have come from a different time, a time where things were thought a certain way. They had to do certain things a certain way. They weren't maybe as advanced as we are now with technology, obviously, and all that stuff. And if one were to sit there and ask a relative, let's say back in the late 1800s or whatever the case may be, what would be the best advice you could give me? How do I not know that they're not using their thought processes from back then in their day, and they're not as advanced or up to date as they are now? So that leads me to the question, does spirit advance like the rest of the world over time, or do they stay stuck in their era, their generation, and at the point of their own death, where they gathered up the best of their lives and the information that they have? What are your thoughts on that?
I do feel like they are more focused on the time that they lived. And I do believe that if you are working with ancestors, of course, in our background, there's so many ancestors and so many that are probably not so savory. So for me, and I love genealogy too, and I don't know a lot of my family history. So when I dive into it, that's the only information I have, unfortunately. But I do know, I have an Italian background, I have a Puerto Rican background, and I have a African Caribbean background. So I have a lot of ancestors that came from Senegal, from all of them, the Ivory Coast, all of that. So we know already Jen has some spicy background history, and it's what are those things and I know when I've taught on this, I've spoke at this a couple conferences, when you are going to work with your ancestors, you call forth the ancestors that are going to be the most helpful and the most encouraging, and you get to pick and choose who you work with and advice you take, just like in normal life. Because you can ask this person, and they give you two totally different realms of advice. But you know that this one feels a little bit more aligned to what you were thinking. So you might go with that one. And I feel that knowing that when you're going into it, knowing that you have the choice, just when you work with spirits around you, you have the choice to talk to them or not talk to them. It is them come in and that's it. You're getting haunted and all that. There are cases of that. There are things, but there is also more to that. I feel like that's a whole nother podcast is about letting in and that, again, that blocking off and all of that. But you get to choose. And I do think the advice, and though when you ask your ancestors, I wouldn't be totally specific. I wouldn't be going on ancestry.com and saying, okay, look at this guy. This is Henry and he lived back in the 1800s. Let's ask him. Leave it open, to the ancestors that can help me with the situation. Can you please come forth? This is my question, and I look forward and thank you for your advice. So even though they're going to give you that advice from that little time frame that they lived in, that might be what you needed. Sometimes we need the most simple piece of advice ever. And it's one of those things you're like, oh yeah. Oh, okay. Because sometimes we do need to bring it back to the beginning. We need to bring it back to the most simple, food, shelter, that type of thing. So I do think that, yeah, you're going to get the advice that you need, even though it might be from somebody back from the 1500s. But that person, might come to you and be like, at this point, you need to take care of your body. You need to take care of yourself. That advice can span millennia, but at that point, and I think also considering that, okay, so this ancestor may have come from the 1500s. Self-care probably wasn't a big thing then. So if they're telling me that I need to practice self-care, then that's probably a big deal. For them to come out of their little woodwork to tell you that, then you probably have to listen. Because if your friend down the street told you and you're like, yeah, self-care, yeah, maybe I'll buy a face mask for tonight, But if somebody back then to where self-care was almost illegal, is telling you that, then you're, okay, this is the perspective it's coming from. So maybe I need to listen.
We'll have to have you back again. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. Tell everybody how they can, what kinds of things you have down the pipeline here, what you've got out, how they can get a hold of you, the whole 10 yards.
Really, if you look up Jen Sankey or Stardust Wanderer Tarot on anything, I will pop up. I do a lot on Instagram. I'm pretty, which, it filters out to all the other things, but, I do have, my book is coming out, in February. It's Manifesting by the Moon, a guide to lunar magic. And I'm so excited. It's a total labor of love. My publisher, Llewellyn, and I really worked to get this as perfect as it can be. And it's really for people who work with the moon all the time, and for people who have never even thought about doing it. I really go through and step by step tell you what to do, how to do it, when to do it. And if you have never made an altar before, there's a chapter for that. If it's work, there's a chapter for that. What are the phases of the moon? There's a chapter for that. So I have all of the information you need to start using the moon as a manifesting tool and to build like a blueprint for yourself. So it's nice and organized and it isn't like just throwing it out in the wind. Because, you know, if you want to manifest something and if you throw an intention out there and you don't do anything, it's just a wish. Mm-hmm. And sometimes wishes do come true, but action steps is really what brings you there.
Thank you for watching and listening to Haunted Mysteries Podcast. The content, music, and creative sound effects as heard on the Haunted Mysteries Podcast are copyrighted and licensed commercially to Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz. Please do not reproduce in any manner without the express permission of Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz, Diamond Point Entertainment, LLC, Paranormal Universal Press, LLC, Haunted Mysteries Podcast, and or any affiliated networks such as the Get Haunted Podcast Network. The opinions and information expressed by the guest, hosts, and sources as heard and seen on the Haunted Mysteries Podcast are not necessarily those of Diamond Point Entertainment, LLC, Paranormal Universal Press, LLC, Haunted Mysteries Podcast, and the Get Haunted Podcast Network, as well as its producers. Although the content of the shows may be interesting, the information and opinions within are deemed for entertainment purposes only. Subscribe to continue your enjoyment and interest, and thank you for making Haunted Mysteries Podcast part of your day.